It's the most wonderful time of the year. When I hear these words, I cannot help but hear the Christmas classic crooned by Andy Williams in my head, and now a bit too often on the radio. The lyrics are filled with seasonal festivities, mentioning toasting marshmallows, caroling, and party hosting, and more. For most of us, some of these activities are a pretty apt description of what we feel and do at this time of year. There are, after all, certain activities, foods, decorations, habits, and events that are those we must do, must make, must participate, and more at this particular time of the year. I always make my Mackinac or Mackinaw, depending on your pronunciation, fudge at this time of year. I always set our wise men on the journey from Advent to Epiphany. And I always go to Peterson Park in Mattoon to see the lights of the Mattoon Lightworks. And then oftentimes before we go to the Lightworks, we go to the original Burger King and have a meal. And of course it includes milkshakes. My favorite Christmas hymn is Once in Royal David City. And my favorite secular one is White Christmas, usually the one sung by the Drifters. And of course, most of you would know that for Christmas dinner around the Butterick house, we have hamburgers, French fries, and milkshakes. I am sure if I asked you what is wonderful this time of year, you would be able to give me a list of activities, foods, decorations, habits, and events that have meaning and purpose for you. Our mental, physical, and emotional checklist are marking each thing off as we busily prepare and share the season. But not everything on our lists would agree with others' lists. And some things would never be described as wonderful at this time of year or any time of year. Illness, death, bad weather. We may not share it as easily as our likes of the season, but we all have things, memories, or items that we never liked or never considered liking. Our preferences reveal not just our favorites, but also our unacceptable, disapproved, opposed, and refused. We are not eager to disclose them. Yet when honesty is expected, there are a few things of the season that I am not that fond of. Eggnog. Blech. Chocolate-covered cherries. The hymn, There's a Song in the Air. Now, on each of these things, I would not say absolutely hate, but rather I just don't like them. And I would certainly not forbid those who enjoy eggnog or chocolate-covered cherries or the hymn, There's a Song in the Air, from singing, eating, or drinking these beloved things, as long as you don't expect me to do it. We are continuing this Sunday our faith lessons based on the Dr. Seuss classic Christmas story, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Despite our best efforts to decorate, participate, or facilitate, the realities of suffering and sin do not disappear at any time of year. And more often than not, it's sometimes in expressions of hate. Our decorations here may be beautiful, our Advent blue paraments and seasonal banners, a welcome sight in our often complimented sanctuary. But when everything is going wrong, Even our time-honored carols seem a bit too loud and the tree a bit too shiny. As we were told last week, there is no explanation given in the story as to why the Grinch hated Christmas. My dislike of eggnog or chocolate-covered cherries or there's a song in the air has really no reasonable explanation or justification. It's other than my personal preferences. But hate, even in its mildest form of just not liking that much, can transform something beautiful into something that's seen as ugly. Our dislike of mild to major disapproval warps our perceptions, exaggerates characteristics, and paints often an inaccurate version of whatever we have come to dislike, to envy, to oppose, or to simply express as hate. But we are too often fooled by our presumptions and gross generalizations. I always think there's two things involved with our gross generalizations. First of all, they're gross, and secondly, they are far too general. There is an inherent human desire, perhaps a survival technique indeed preserved to us, to fit in, to belong, to join, and to associate with those who we believe think like us, believe like us, and have the same preferences and opinions. We all have our group, we all have our crowd, and we seek them out. As you know, usually at the opening weekend of baseball, we have Baseball Sunday here, and of course, we dress ourselves in our beloved teams, and Chicago fans find each other just as much as St. Louis Cardinal fans discover one another. Country music fans find other country music fans, as do heavy metal fans often find heavy metal fans. Democrats find Democrats. Republicans find Republicans. We each have a tribe and station, and oftentimes, half jokingly to almost deadly serious, as discovered just this past January 6th. Hate enters our psyche and causes us to do all kinds of things out of context. In our rush to belong and fit in, we share certain realities as unquestioned. But often our certainty is a sign of our failure to look around without our bias in place. Many people recall where they were when they heard something dramatic like a celebrity or political leader's death. Some recall hearing the announcement of the death of Nelson Mandela in prison in the 1980s. Except this event did not happen at all when everyone tries to remember it. Nelson Mandela was released from a South African prison in 1990. He never died in prison. He became president of South Africa in 1994 and died in 2013 at the age of 95. And often it skirts our social media stream as to, oh, so-and-so has died, when we discover with a simple Wikipedia search that the person died years, if not decades, ago. This is called the Mandela effect, because of this reason that people misremember the death of Nelson Mandela. Here are a few other examples of our convinced and yet inaccurate memories. How is the name of the cereal Fruit Loops really spelled? Is it spelled as we spell fruit, or is it spelled differently? Well, if you guessed or said fruit as F-R-O-O-T, you are correct. And despite what your taste buds may have been saying for years, each colored loop is exactly the same flavor. There's no different fruit flavors in Fruit Loops. Which name is right for this product? Jiffy peanut butter, Jif peanut butter, or Jeff peanut butter? Well, if you guessed or said Jif peanut butter, you're right. There's never been a Jiffy peanut butter product. So often our disapproval or dislike may rest on inaccurate or incorrect memories or experiences. And sometimes we just dislike something or someone because we are envious of their record of success and victory. For baseball, the New York Yankees come to mind, other than New York Yankee fans liking them. And short of him being on your National Football League team, I think there's a universal disgust with Tom Brady, wherever he is playing and whoever he's playing for. Do we not often find a little delight in hearing news of our rival experiencing a loss? Cardinal fans are in glee when the Cubs are free-falling and fulfilling their self-fulfilled prophecy, often of completely useless by September. Or Cub fans greedily looking that St. Louis has fallen from the top. A setback that we are rooting for. I remember in high school the rivalry between Beamont and Cerro Gordo. Now some of the teams are merged because neither school has enough players to fill a team roster. Unfortunately, increasingly, this looking for someone's defeat is showing up more and more in everyday life. When we go to vote, oftentimes it's less a case of voting for someone as much as we are voting against the other person. Often when something is known to be hated, others use it to get it at the person who disclosed their dislike or disapproval. The Grinch's hate for the Who's meant that the only solution that would satisfy his small heart would be to take everything that they love, which appeared to be everything about the Christmas season, and use taking it away as a weapon and forever mar the memory of Christmas, always remembering the Christmas without all the trimmings. Hence, the wonderful and awful idea. Hate has always been able to muster control, power, and oppression to achieve its ends. The offer of worldly peace comes with threats of these unrestrained forces used to take away, to put down, and to keep from. We might think that hate is a bad word, but our scripture reading in the prophet Amos has God speaking of hate against Israel's continued injustice and arrogance. He doesn't care at all about their festivals and solemn assemblies, their religious gatherings and religious practices. Hate may truly depend more on its context than what we thought. Preference and opinion rather than fact or truth, rivalry and envy rather than differences in talents and skills. God speaks of hating Israel's religious ceremonies and festivals because it gives them the excuse to not pay attention to justice and righteousness with their neighbors. You might know all the words, but unless you seek to live them out, they are of no use. Singing peace does not make it happen. Living and doing is required. God's peace does not come in power, control, or oppression. Evil always uses these methods, and I doubt many of us love evil and hate good. Our world measures peace more often by absence of war, absence of conflict, absence of dissent, and absence of rivalry. God measures peace by wholeness of person, wholeness of community, wholeness of creation. Approaching as we are the shortest day of the year in just a couple weeks, we find it natural to seek as much light as we can find. Light, after all, is timeless, neither aging or decaying, unless it's disconnected from its source. Light is also powerful, dispelling darkness and our associated fears that come when we can no longer see. But light is also passive, illuminating spaces for us rather than seeking our attention. Staring into the light will make us blind. And we've discovered light can also be used as a means of communication, as seen in fiber optic cables or Morse code, or a personal favorite of mine from literature, light the beacons of Gondor so that Rohan will come to our aid. Christ is the light of the world because Christ is our eternal and constant guide. Christ is the light of the world because Christ is powerful and passive. Christ is the light of the world because Christ communicates the reality and will of God. If we stare at the light, we will become blind, failing to see others in our midst. And Christ also offers peace. When we seek to love our neighbors as ourselves, we must also seek peace with them. And as we know too well, peace is often a tricky thing. True peace is not a lack of conflict or the absence of war. That is the way the world and its rulers choose to enforce its power, its control, and oppression. This holy peace is a true reconciliation between God and humanity and neighbor to neighbor. It is being at peace with oneself, even when all the toys have been put away and the decorations removed. This kind of peace is something that the Grinch cannot steal. Oscar Romero, the martyred Archbishop of El Salvador, said these words about peace. Peace is not the product of terror or fear. Peace is not the silence of cemeteries. Peace is not the result of violent repression. Peace is the generous, tranquil contribution of all to the good of all. Peace is dynamism. Peace is generosity. It is right and duty. What peace are you seeking? Is it peace offered at the price of absence, removing what offends, what objects, or perhaps those who offend or object? Does hate interfere with sight, keeping the true measure and worth of others in the dark? Does your peace this season and every season take away, or will it give? The peace the Grinch thought he needed would come from taking the Who's Christmas away. Every object and symbol, note and food. But as dawn arose in Whoville, amid every possible loss and absence, the Who's still gathered together, still gave, still contributed. Peace brings us into hope, and that hope shows us everlasting peace. Will you take or give it? Amen.